Can we get the first of our pitches up? Participation Nation. There you go. These aren't the pitches as they were brought through to us. I've actually got these on here, and they vary from 2 or 3 pages to 64 pages.
63.
63 pages. There you go. Matt's got it on his BlackBerry if you want to have a look at it later. Excuse us looking over our shoulders as well. We don't have fold back here. This was a production which I've just kind of titled Second Life Meets Sundance. It wasn't quite as succinct as that on the pitch, and our role isn't really to kind of tear their pitch apart, but just use this as a sort of a number of sort of springboards to think about how commissioners are starting to put ideas together. What Participation Nation really was a sort of 3D environment, a Second Life environment, if you like, within which people can create digital video that would then emerge in a real-world scenario, so whether it was going to be with a TV partner or with other online partners or mobile or so on. The pitch itself is a couple of pages, very wordy, and I think it's probably just worth us having a quick sort of bounce around of what the best kind of pitch to get is. I mean, inevitably, it's going to follow up a cover letter and a phone call and an introduction at an event like this, and maybe someone's introduced you, or if you're lucky, a commissioner's seen another piece of work that you've done, and they sort of say, well, that's not one for me, but I think, I've got another idea that I'd like you to work on. And I'm afraid you can't see it here, but I've got a couple of pages of pure text. I don't get a visual sense, so I'm having to make that up myself, which is okay. But the problem is that everyone is time short on this, and so I will go for the easiest approach to it, which is, okay, it's Second Life meets Sundance. Do I like the idea of that? Does that fit with me? Now, if that doesn't actually fit with your idea that you're pitching, then you've obviously missed that first beat. So why don't we just do a quick round of sort of, is text the best place, or should it be video, or should it be on mobile?
I think it's, one of the first questions you need to ask in building a relationship with the commissioner is knowing what they need, because they often have to sell the product back internally, and so their needs are going to be hugely different. Sometimes you're lucky and then there is a formal process. So at Channel 4 we have an online commissioning service, which is basically an online tool you can use to pitch projects into commissioners across the whole channel. The challenge for me in that is it's set up for telly, so it asks things like, how many hours is it going to be, what's the talent? So I'm kind of having to get people to hack that slightly for the projects that we're going to be commissioning. But if there isn't a system, then do spend a bit of time just saying, look, what do you need me to give you? Do you need visuals? Do you need prototypes? Do you need me to create a business plan? Do you need to kind of have the financials in place? What information? Because often commissioners, particularly if it's an area like, say, mobile, etc., that doesn't do a lot of commissioning, they might not have a system set up. They might not actually know what they need. So actually getting them to articulate their needs is probably the first step. And it sounds really obvious, but it's there's so often you get someone sending you a pitch and it just doesn't even begin to answer the questions that you have, and that might be because you haven't told them. But your job as the kind of supplier is often to do a bit of wrangling with them to get them to actually voice their needs, and that's often the hardest thing.
Well, I found at 3 that it's interesting when the two of you were doing your introduction that you were saying within public sector it's a very nefarious world, and it's very difficult to know how to achieve what the BBC wants to achieve, because it's
nefarious or nebulous?
A little bit of both. Whereas in a sort of the grubby commercial world of Orange, it's much more about what's that bottom line. And for my feeling is that's a much nicer pitch to have. And when I was inviting people to come in with mobile ideas at 3, a lot of them were very artistic, very out there, very left field, but weren't going to get through the first level of product management because it just wasn't going to be delivering the kind of bottom line that they need. So to be able to sort of go into a commercial organisation and say, here is a product and here is how it's going to affect the bottom line, it counts, doesn't it? It
certainly does count. And for me, there were actually frightening phrases in the Participation Nation document, like dynamic multiplayer 3D virtual world, which said continuous broadband connectivity on high-end devices, e.g. turning off most of the Orange customer base instantly. So it said, this is not a mobile product to me, so I kind of switched off. Worse still is I couldn't have even taken it to any of the enabler teams that would help me with network connectivity or handset rendering or all those other things, because there was no simple elevator pitch for me to just almost learn parrot fashion and repeat. Because I'd only get these people's attention for 15 seconds. I'd say, I've got this great idea. It does this, it does that, and we can make 10 bob.
The elevator pitch is really important, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. For me, it's the classic scenario where, the Hollywood executive is in the lift and the aspiring, producer, director, etc., runs in, and they've got, until they get to the bottom floor to give their pitch. And for me, it is all about that pitch. And if I can't get it instantly, then it's something more complicated. I'm going to have to take more time, and so it just means it's going to get pushed down the list. Doesn't mean it's not a brilliant idea. It just means from a time management standpoint, it's going to take a little bit more time to get there. So for me, it's really building on a lot of the previous comments. It's, what is it in a very, very succinct way? Who is it addressing? In other words, is it, a certain demographic? Is it a certain type of user behavior? Who are you trying to address? Who's going to potentially like this? And what comes after that as part of who's going to like it is, from a pure business standpoint, is this going to drive, page views, revenue, consumption, time spent for my existing audience? Or is this going to help me build reach? Is this going to help me bring in people who have never used, Bebo before? Is this going to bring in a whole new demographic, a whole new set of people? And it's okay if it's just addressing the existing ones, as long as it's either helping to, build on one of my business metrics, which would either be, time spent, number of page views or number of interactions if it's via another device, or an entirely new audience.
I think it's important also to demonstrate that you understand the environment, whether it's the business or the creative environment, that commissioner is operating. And part of that is obviously the relationship that you build up and what you know with that person, but also you have to demonstrate that you understand the competitive environment they're in as well. I know that you have an acronym, or had an acronym over the BBC.
Yeah, the BBC kind of nicked an acronym from Stanford Research Institute, which we used internally for pitching, and we used that as a basis of Innovation Labs, which was basically 4 questions. So SRI had this idea, and this was in a very technical science environment, that any idea that they were trying to get support for internally needed to answer 4 questions. And the acronym was NABC. So what's the need? What's the approach? So in other words, need, what user need are you addressing? Why will people actually want to use your product? And who are those people? Approach, so what is it that you're actually proposing to do? What is the idea? What is the kind of solution? Benefits, which is what are the benefits to the user? What kind of increased experience or whatever are you going to get? But also for the client. So that's where you can put in bottom line stuff. This is going to grow reach. This is going to increase your bottom line, whatever. And then competitions, just to kind of say that you know what's out there and you know why this is different or better or cheaper or simpler or whatever. And I think if you can use that NABC, you can actually sell virtually any idea in that.
The competition, I think, is a key one there, because one of the things that Participation Nation was missing for me was an acknowledgement of A, other 3D environments, and B, other user-generated film environments, whether it's going to be Zoetrope or 4Docs or whoever. And I think you need to say, we get that this is the world that, if you're interested in Second Life meets Sundance, we get that you're in this world and this is what you're up against. And we've already thought through a lot of those questions for you. I'm sorry, one of my roles here is to make sure that we don't run over time, but I don't actually know what our end